after the last leadership election when Keir Starmer was chosen. I think she was a bit gutted she didn't go for it. She didn't quite say that to me, I should be clear. I'm not suggesting that she did say that, but I got the vibe that, do you remember, she sort of gave way to Rebecca Long-Bailey when she ran as Rebecca Long-Bailey's number two, her understudy as deputy. And I think Angela Rayner probably thought that was the wrong way round in the end, and that if she'd gone for leader, she would have had a decent shot at it when Keir Starmer got it. So I wouldn't be so sure that Angela Rayner's going to be willing to repeat history there and play second fiddle to whoever wants to run for leader, and then she becomes sort of de facto deputy leader. But let's see what happens over the course of this year. If anything, maybe nothing will happen. It has been known that Westminster watchers chat a lot of proverbial, and that ultimately things don't transpire the way that the analysts suppose. It is 4:30. You're listening to Paul Brand on LBC. We'll hear more from a pollster at More in Common about how the polls are responding to leadership challenges in just a few moments' time. But first, let's get the news headlines now with Lucinda Halstein.
The US Secretary of State, Mark Rubio, says his country's at war with drug traffickers, not Venezuela. An American military operation captured the country's leader yesterday, and Nicolas Maduro's now facing drug and weapons charges. Several children are among the dozens of bodies identified after a fire at a Swiss ski resort bar. At least 40 people were killed when it broke out on New Year's Eve. Searches are continuing for two men, including one convicted murderer who have escaped prison. Matthew Armstrong and Daniel Washbourne haven't been seen since New Year's Day after leaving HMP Leyhill in South Gloucestershire. LBC weather, wintry showers moving south across parts of central and southern England and Wales tonight, a low of -3.
This is LBC.
This is Sarah's last game before she does her self-assessment. Like her last game, and the last game before that. Classic. Come on, Sarah, the deadline is 31st of January. Less distraction, more action.
Don't be like Sarah. Visit gov.uk/self-assessment today. Payment support may be available.
Everything dinner at Ocado. Save on sausages, tin tomatoes, and get a great price on garlic. Then splurge on the fancy pasta. The kind you know you're pronouncing wrong, which means it must be good. Save and splurge at Ocado, the online supermarket. Select lines only, geographical restrictions, minimum spend and charges apply. Offers end 27th of Jan. Terms and offer info at ocado.com/terms.
When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.
Life feels better with a smile. Banning Dental Group Clinics. Modern, comfortable and affordable dentistry for all. See online for our price match promise. Keep on smiling.
Keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles with you.
banningdental.co.uk.
The Hilton sale is now on, and thankfully it doesn't sound like this. Instead, our sale sounds a bit more like this.
Welcome back.
With a warm welcome, spacious rooms, central locations, and up to 20% off your stay. You can swap chaos for comfort this winter. Book now at Hilton.com. Hilton, for the stay. Offer subject to availability across participating hotels. Terms and conditions apply.
Find me somebody to love.
The dream sale ends Tuesday with up to 40% off. How do you beds feel?
We're comfortable with it.
And this weekend, the more you spend, the more you save, with up to £200 off. Even on products already on sale.
But don't hang about. You snooze, you lose.
Dreams. Love your bed.
This is LBC with Paul Brand. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
Good afternoon, it's Paul Brand here on LBC. The paper's full of leadership speculation again today as we head into 2026. People saying, can Keir Starmer last the year? He says yes, he'll still be here this time next year. Do you think he will be? 0345 6060 973. Who could possibly replace him? We heard from a caller earlier saying Jess Phillips. Some of you have your own views on who should or shouldn't replace him. Sam, who's a new caller, says Paul West Streeting isn't left enough for people engaged in politics, and he's a carbon copy of Starmer. for those who aren't engaged in politics would be a terrible choice, in my opinion, says Sam. Mary's texted in from Oxford saying, good evening, Paul. Starmer may lack charisma, but he has honour and gravitas, she says. His intelligence is real and he is respected internationally. He needs a chancellor with business experience and appropriate economic understanding. Oh, Mary, harsh to blame Rachel Reeves for all the problems, isn't it? Let's blame the man as well in number 10, no? And another one here from Marek, who says, what exactly do we blame Starmer for? What specific errors did Labour make that people are so unhappy with? Brexit made the UK uninvestable. Is that the word? I'll take it. And anyone can name one reason why the US multinational should invest in the UK instead of Ireland. Okay, because, of course, we're looking at tax regimes being different between Ireland and the UK. Right, I want to talk about some polling now that shows the situation that Labour is in, because More in Common have done the latest sort of seat projection over the weekend using their polling to try and work out what the next Parliament might look like if there was an election tomorrow. And look, caveat this with the fact there isn't an election for another 3 years potentially. So these are speculative figures at this stage, but nevertheless they're very interesting. And Louis O'Garren is Research and Communications Associate at More in Common. Afternoon to you, Louis.
Good afternoon.
Shall we just run through what the poll found, first of all? Do you want to give me the seat projection that you guys came up with?
Yeah, absolutely. So how this works is we use the current vote share in our opinion polls, using a large sample and project it over the country, as you say, to see what an election tomorrow would look like. And the result is a resounding Reform UK win with 381 seats. So not a huge majority, not as large as Labour's in 2024, but still a really clear front runner. But the really interesting thing is Labour's position on just 85 seats. That puts them just 15 seats ahead of the Conservatives, who would win 70 seats. And you also see big gains for the Green Party, more than doubling their seat share to 9 seats. So what you have is a deeply fragmented parliament, with Labour just barely ahead of the Conservatives.
Yeah, and also the SNP and Plaid Cymru also doing fairly well. SNP back to 40, not quite the high mark that they had in, what was it, 2015, I think, when they had sort of 54 or something insane out of 57 seats in Scotland. Plaid Cymru on 5, which is up 1 for them in Wales, so the Nationalist Party's doing well. I mean, at least the Tories are looking slightly better off in this poll than the last one you did, right? Because they're up by a handful of seats. I mean, there have been people saying that maybe Kemi Badenoch is having a bit of a bounce in the polls, that maybe she's closing a little bit of the gap on Reform UK. Do you think there's evidence for that here, potentially?
There's definitely early signs that Kemi Badenoch has started to perform better in the polls. Something really interesting we saw towards the end of 2025 was actually Kemi Badenoch's approval rating shooting up with Reform UK voters. So definitely some evidence that she's starting to perhaps win over some voters on the right who have been disaffected with the Conservative Party. I think her performance after the budget in the House of Commons was one of the really potentially breakthrough moment. One of the things we've heard in focus groups is people actually quite like Kemi Badenoch. Conservative voters tend to quite like her when they see her. She's just really struggled to win over the attention economy in the way that Nigel Farage has. So perhaps this is an early sign that she's beginning to get in front of voters and that some on the right are really liking what they see.
Interesting. I was reading some of your analysis that More in Common put out around this polling as well, to do with tactical voting, right? Because I guess that's the one unknown. I don't know whether your polling sort of puts it to voters, right? If you had to vote for a party in order to stop another party, what would you do? But that's the one unknown in the raw polling that you've got here, the MRP polling. We don't know what voters might do if they were faced, for example, with a Reform candidate that they didn't like. Would they all row in behind a Labour candidate or a Green candidate or a Lib Dem candidate, etc., and vice versa? If they were faced with a Labour candidate they didn't like, would they all row in behind Reform or the Conservatives? Do you think that will be a big factor in the next election, tactical voting?
Absolutely. I think our polling in this MRP, we found that if parties on the left united behind candidates, we could actually see Reform lose their majority in certain circumstances. I think it's a dynamic we saw play out in the Caerphilly by-election back in October. Reform did incredibly well there in getting voters out, but also we saw voters come out to vote against them in record numbers. And we saw voters coalesce around Plaid Cymru. I think this is particularly a dynamic we could see in, for example, parts of London that have elections coming up, where Labour faces progressive defections to the Green Party or to independent candidates. If they can unite the left around candidates in different areas, it could really undermine Reform's vote share, and in a general election, it could even rob them of a majority.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, I think, the next elections. I guess this time, compared to 2024, I mean, the choices in 2024 weren't radically different by historical standards. Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, there were clear differences between them, I'm wrong, but they weren't sort of radically different. They weren't far right and far left. Not that I'm suggesting anyone else maybe is far left before we still start texting him. But you can't say that Nigel Farage and, say, Zach Polanski of the Green Party aren't very different propositions, or even Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage are very different propositions on lots of matters. So it will be interesting to see if tactical voting therefore takes off, because people feel very strongly about the choices on one end of the scale or the other. What about the prospect for a different leader to have a different outcome for the Labour Party? Have you guys, I don't know whether you've done any polling on this, and don't worry if you haven't, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Louis, but do you get any sense of if Labour changed leader, would they then perform better in the polls, do you think?
Yeah, well, it's really hard to say, I think, particularly because, as it stands, a lot of other members of the cabinet just don't have a high level of awareness with the public, and those who are most high profile, for example, Rachel Reeves, their popularity tends to mirror Keir Starmer's. So I think the real risk is twofold, really. The first is that it reinforces a sense of chaos. I think people really don't want to see a return to the resignation to factionalism that they saw at the end of the Conservative government. So replacing the Prime Minister this early in their term really doesn't look good. But also, if it isn't matched with a wider change of direction from the government, something we hear in focus groups all the time is people saying that this goes deeper than just Keir Starmer. He certainly has a personal problem with his popularity, but he's also part of a deeply unpopular government at a time where politicians as a whole are deeply unpopular. So unless the new candidate was someone who could convincingly show the public that they were different and that they were changing direction, it's hard to see Labour bounce back fully to their former strength.
And isn't that always going to be the challenge for a mainstream party like Labour, that has to unify different wings of the party? Is that we live in this sort of polarised world now, which is a total cliche. Everyone knows that. I'm just stating the absolute obvious, but it's quite, therefore, the cut through that someone like Nigel Farage gets is very clear. And look, listeners will either love or hate Nigel Farage. They'll have a strong view on him either way. But you can't deny that he has cut through and people kind of know what he's about. Whereas when you're the Labour Party and you're straddling different wings, on the one hand you've got the likes of Shabana Mahmood, who's quite hawkish on migration. On the other hand, you've got doves in the party who think we should have as much immigration as the country needs. It's a much harder job to be a leader of a Labour Party and to have a really clear proposition that says, you know what, we're going to go all out in favour of immigration or all out against immigration. You have to kind of sit on the fence to some degree and straddle those things. So I just wonder whether, people might think on paper, I don't know, Wes Streeting's better or Andy Burnham's better. But when they actually get into the job of leading the Labour Party, especially if they're Prime Minister, they're always going to have to compromise to some extent, which is the trap for the leader of a mainstream party or a sort of centrist-ish party. They can never be as sort of rabble-rousing as the likes of Nigel Farage, can they?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that key word there, compromise. I think what people really want and what attracts people to Reform UK is their promise to radically change the country. A phrase we use all the time is a politics of can rather than a politics of can't, and that is really what Reform UK or Zach Polanski and the Green Party are offering. It's a radically different vision for the country, whether or not you agree with it. So the real challenge for anybody representing an incumbent government at this point is kind of mobilising the public and satisfying that desire for change, and also governing the country and all the practical difficulties that presents.
Yeah, I mean, for all the runners and riders to be Prime Minister, honestly, I don't know why anyone would want to do the job. I wish it was different. I wish it was the best job in the world, and we could all feel really enthused and excited about being Prime Minister, and that it was a job full of wonderful achievements chance, but inevitably it is a miserable job. And I think no matter what the power, you'd have to be slightly mad to want to have to do it. But anyway, Louis, thank you. You've got a much nicer job being a pollster. I think what you do is fascinating. So thank you, Lucky Stars, that you're carrying on with that in 2026 and not running to be Labour leader. And that was Louis O'Garren there, who's Research and Communications Associate at More in Common, talking about this MRP poll putting Reform UK on 381 seats. Quite a significant majority for them. Labour on 85 seats, according to current polling. Again, major caveat, it's only a poll. The election's 3 years away, but nevertheless, it does speak to the challenge Keir Starmer's got. If you don't like Reform UK, if you're worried about Nigel Farage being Prime Minister, and we know that people feel he's a kind of Marmite figure, do you think Labour should change leader now to give them a better prospect of winning the next election? If you're looking at these numbers and thinking, oh my goodness, 381 seats for Reform UK, a stonking majority, the ability to do whatever they want, essentially in power, would it be better for Labour to change course now and roll the dice again, see if another leader can have a better shot at it? Or is it better to stick with Keir Starmer and say, we can't repeat the chaos of the Tories changing leaders every couple of years? We've got to show we're more grown up in politics than that. What do you think? Can Keir Starmer last the year? Should he last the year? Is it in the national interest, as he says? Is it in your interest that he remains Prime Minister or not? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. It's 4:45. You're listening to Paul Brand on LBC.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Shambolic failure. That's all you can say about the government's attempt to try and stop those illegal crossings. Remember how idiotically Rishi Sunak said he would stop the boats? That was never going to happen. And Labour, well, now they stand accused of actually managing to get it almost worse. Steve's in Guildford.
The Labour Party is just tearing itself to pieces. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a prediction. This government will not see its full term. There will be a no confidence vote before very, very long, because everyone's just sick to death of all this. They get up in the morning and their policies are akin to the headlines of the newspapers.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
I love visiting Mum and Dad, but as they've gotten older, I've worried about leaving them on their own, especially in winter. We visit as often as we can, but they needed more regular help. That's why we're so grateful to Ellie, their home instead care professional who lives with them and is always there when she's needed. It means Mum and Dad can stay in the home they love, and it gives us peace of mind to know they're okay when we're not there. For award-winning home care you can trust, visit homeinstead.co.uk.
The famous five were at home, and Julian could barely contain his excitement. "Why are you so excited?" asked George. "Is it your birthday? Is it snowing?" asked Dick. "Are we having treacle sponge tonight?" asked Anne. "No," said Julian. "It's the Great GWR Getaway Sale." The Great GWR Getaway Sale is now on. Hurry, book before January 5th at gwr.com or on the app. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms apply. Selected routes only. Travel by April 10th.
Hiya, Kenny the hamster here, proud pet of Doug and Carol. Hey up, looks like my mum Carol's off out with the girls again. I tell you, since she took that quick NHS Healthy Choices quiz, she's drinking less, but going out more. And to think, she thought being healthy would mean being boring. You might want to give it a go yourself. Go, girlfriend!
Take your first little step to healthy. Search NHS Healthy Choices quiz to get a score and a simple plan to follow.
Hello, you've reached the voicemail of Holiday Rebecca. She's a bit like work Rebecca, except her stress headache is gone. Her frown lines have faded, and instead of hunching over her desk with a meal deal, she's enjoying fresh, hand-rolled pasta for lunch. If you require work Rebecca, please try again in about 10 days.
Take your holiday seriously. British Airways Holidays. At all protected.
Paul Brand on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Good afternoon, listening to Paul Brand here on LBC. Great to have your company this Sunday afternoon. A few of you texting in again on this issue of whether we should change Labour leader, change Prime Minister at this stage in the electoral cycle. Kate says, "Hi Paul, I think Starmer should stay as a steady hand on the tiller of the Labour ship. Yes, I usually vote Tory." Is that tactical then, Kate? You're sort of saying actually keep Starmer because you think he's not exactly an electoral asset, he's an electoral liability for the Labour Party. Jenny says, "I so agree about Andy Burnham's eyebrows." Oh, the better. Christopher says you're missing the point. They can change leader, and if they continue to follow the current path, nothing will change. So this point about it's not just who's in charge, it's what they believe in and what they drive through that really matters in politics. Right, Milo is in Seven Sisters. Afternoon to you, Milo.
Well, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
So I think we need to be kind of balanced with regard to Keir Starmer in the sense that he has been leader of the Labour Party for 6 years. Granted, he's been Prime Minister for the best part of 2, but the qualities that he exuded as an opposition leader in terms of his forensic questioning during all the lockdown, breaking of the rules and so on, aren't necessarily the same qualities that are needed in a Prime Minister. So actually, as an opposition leader, he was highly effective during the 4 years prior to the election. But what's happened since is that his communication style has been severely hampered both by the economic decisions that have been taken by his Chancellor, but also his communication style of his own. It comes across a lot more as a commentator rather than somebody leading from the front. And that's where somebody like Wes Streeting is far better placed, because he is slightly more combative in his stance with the media, and also is able to give sound bites much more readily, because people aren't picking up on sort of loyally quotes and listening to them in the way that they might have done a couple of days ago.
I think Wes Streeting probably is a better communicator. But do you take the point that I was putting to Louis from More in Common earlier, that actually whoever leads the Labour Party is always going to be in a bit of a bind, because they have to hold together this broad umbrella of people from different wings. They're never going to be able to be as sort of straight talking as Nigel Farage, who has a much narrower base to his support.
He has a narrower and more loyal following, for sure. Basically, whatever he says, they're going to take. But in an election where it's going to be very fine margins either way, I mean, it's not as though Reform are going to romp home on 27% of the vote. I mean, it requires quite a bit in the margin of error. That could easily drop with the tactical voting. So any difference that Labour is able to secure meaningfully from within itself, it should look for, because ultimately we are moving into an era of five-party politics now, and obviously our system of government isn't typically geared to coping with as many parties as are on offer. And so that means that they have to make significant tactical decisions, and they have been given one huge favour, which is by virtue of the Conservatives changing leader twice, there wouldn't be an immediate clamour for a general election in the same way that there might have been under previous governments. And so I think they do have quite a bit of breathing space. I think somebody who's willing to take a more aggressive stance regarding Brexit will also bring on a lot more sort of Middle England and progressive voters in the South. And I think actually that would be a big turning point as far as if they can galvanise that together with economic growth and people start to feel it ahead of a general election. That could easily make a difference to the extent that they may not get the same majority they have now, but they certainly could easily become the largest party.
Do you think then that Wes, out of the candidates that keep doing their rounds, do you think Wes Streeting is the better ones you mentioned?
I think he is. I mean, I think in person he's also, comes across as he does do on television.
You met him?
Like his act. I have met him, yes, and I've met Keir Starmer in person as well. He just cuts through in a way that I feel that Keir Starmer will vacillate more because of his legal background, I think. He doesn't want to give a definitive answer, which can be very helpful in terms of complex issues, but where people are expecting an immediate reaction, that's where people want to see the kind of, also the emotional intelligence of the person who's holding that office, not just simply what's in a policy document. And that's where Wes Streeting can cut through.
All right, Milo, thank you so much for your call this afternoon. Lisa's in Brentwood in Essex. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Paul. Where do I start, really?
Wherever you want.
I have to start. Please don't take this personal.
I won't.
Because I do appreciate you. I do appreciate all the work you do for ITV. But anyway, on a separate issue, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, why are journalists like yourself and all the others going on about who's going to replace Keir Starmer? Should Keir Starmer go? Should this happen? Should Andy Burnham take over? Should this one? And I'm just thinking, around, people are discussing all of this.
Attention, road works.
There's far more important things to discuss in the world.
The
And
point of
also,
payment for travel.
with Keir Starmer, he
Slow
was
down the
voted
speed.
in, democratically in July 2024, but I think journalists expected him on day one of turning the ship around from the disaster that the Conservative Party left the country in after 14 years. But it wasn't going to happen. Had they made mistakes? Oh yes, Labour have.
Two things.
But I do think that the advisors around Keir Starmer have a lot to answer to, because if you look back to the Tony Blair era, he had very, very good communicators around him.
Well, he was a good communicator himself, which helped. You know, if you've got a front man who can sell a message, he was good. I mean, a couple of things just on your point there, Lisa, in terms of why we're discussing it, and I'm very, very, very happy for you to critique the state of journalism. Anyone's welcome to do that. There's no bar on that on the show. But firstly, I think the reason why journalists are discussing it is because it's being discussed in political circles. So they're picking up on the rumour mill in Westminster and what people are saying. I appreciate the point that maybe they're amplifying it. Maybe I'm amplifying it by talking about it this hour. I'm totally happy to take that criticism. And the second thing I'd say is I take your point, actually. I wonder whether we've become sort of addicted to this political drama over the past few years, because until 2019, when Theresa May went and Boris Johnson took over, and then that sort of precipitated this round of changing Prime Minister every couple of years, it was pretty rare, actually, for a Prime Minister to leave office mid-term. I think probably the last one would have been Margaret Thatcher in the early 90s when John Major took over. So we've sort of become a bit addicted to this thing that, well, if they're not doing well after 18 months, sling them out and get a new one in. It didn't used to be like that between electoral cycles before. You just sort of had to stick it out.
Yeah, you're quite right, but who's addicted to it? You journalists are, because the more you keep talking about it and putting it in the public domain, then the public will hang on to that and they'll run with it, which is what you journalists do. You put a story out there and the general public run with it, and here we are having a discussion for an hour on LBC about a hypothetical replacement of Keir Starmer.
But we're doing that because politicians are talking about replacing it. That we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't genuinely a thing being discussed in Labour circles.
Yeah, circles, critique circles, who
Labour circles.
About this thing. Yeah, but because the journalists, you go to these backbenchers, whoever are leaking stories to you, and you have a chat with them, and you ask, "Oh, you're happy with Keir Starmer? What's going on?" And they say, "No, not really." And then you put the line to them, "Do you think Keir Starmer should go?" And they think for a minute, and they say, "Oh yeah, well, I hadn't thought about that, but maybe that's the problem." That goes round and round, and then here we are, like I said, spending an hour discussing this, and that's what happened. Just let them get on with doing the job that they're trying to do, and they are struggling because we were in a terrible situation. All you got to do is look across the pond at what's happening in America with Trump. Okay, I'll bring that in very, very quickly.
Go for it.
He promised to make America great again, and they all voted for him, and now they're seeing that actually they're worse off with him. He can say that he's better off, but the people in America know that their groceries are costing more, petrol's costing more, and now he's invaded Venezuela. But anyway, like I said, that's a different point.
Yeah, but Lisa, thank you. Appreciate your call. I want to squeeze in Linda as well in Hertfordshire. Linda, afternoon to you.
I support what that lady just said, and some other people. When you come on LBC now, it's the same thing with every single person. At the end of the day, they have done good. They've brought in nursery costs for parents. They've upped the minimum wage. They've upped the money that you can earn, the living wage. I really think there's more important things to be talking about than replacing the Labour Party. When you think we had 14 years of the Tory government that destroyed everything, and everything's been put on to Keir Starmer. Let them get on with the work. And another thing,
appreciated you discussing it. Right, coming up after 5. Should the House of Lords have the constitutional right to end the life of the assisted dying bill? Some of you called in and said, why are we discussing Keir Starmer? Here's a life and death issue for you in this next hour. It comes back to the Lords again this Friday, the bill, the assisted dying bill. It's already been debated for days, but peers have tabled over 1,000 amendments, which means it may well run out of time in Parliament, and therefore the bill just falls. Opponents of the bill say, tough luck, that's proper parliamentary scrutiny. But after more than a year of scrutiny in the Commons, where MPs voted for the bill twice, is it really fair for the Lords to scupper it now, especially when a majority of the public agree
The point
with
of payment for
assisted
travel.
dying? Should the Lords
Slow
block
down
assisted
the
dying?
speed.
Let me know what you think.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 5 o'clock. The US Secretary of State has been justifying the operation to go into Venezuela and capture the country's president.
We just can't allow it. We can't have a country where the people in charge of its military and in charge of its police department are openly cooperating with drug trafficking organizations. We're not going to allow that. These things are direct threats to the United States.
An American military operation captures Nicolas Maduro in Caracas yesterday. He's now facing drug and weapons charges at a court in New York. LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks says Mark Rubio's been deliberately cryptic about some particular aspects of the operation.
He refuses to be drawn on what happens if the new president, Rodriguez, will not accede to those demands. He says the president of the United States retains the optionality to launch a fresh military assault on Venezuela. He says he doesn't think this has to be at all about boots on the ground.
Sir Keir Starmer says the government will align the UK even more with the EU single market if the move is in the national interest. But Sir Keir has seemingly rejected the idea of the UK rejoining a customs union with the bloc. Authorities in Switzerland have identified more victims from the deadly ski resort fire, which killed at least 40 people. 2 people who were running the bar are now under criminal investigation. Beat Jan, Switzerland's justice minister, has visited the scene.
It's incredibly emotional to see the place and realise how strong the power of these flames must have been.
Some weather warnings for parts of the UK have been upgraded to amber as wintry conditions are
The point of payment for travel.
Met Office
Slow
alerts
down
for
the
heavy
speed.
snow cover parts of Scotland from 6 p.m. this evening until 10 a.m. tomorrow. A ban on advertising junk food comes into force tomorrow. Adverts featuring items high in fat, salt and sugar won't appear online at all and before the watershed on TV. LBC weather, wintry showers moving south across parts of central and southern England and Wales tonight. A low of -3. Very cold again tomorrow, dry and sunny for many, but snow continuing in northern areas with highs of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lucinda Horsley.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Paul Brand.
Good evening, it's Paul Brand here on LBC. Great to have your company this Sunday evening. Now, we haven't heard much about it lately, but one of the biggest social changes of our time could take place this year. Assisted dying could become legal in England and Wales by early summer, and also in Scotland via a separate bill there, possibly as soon as late spring. It would totally change the relationship, of course, between the state and its citizens, sanctioning for the first time the ending of a life, legalising assistance on a death. It's been legalised in multiple countries in recent years. We're talking Spain, Germany, Portugal, Canada, even Latin America, like Uruguay, for example, just before Christmas. A dozen or so American states, including New York, California. That's on top of ones that are already legalised it yonks ago, like Switzerland, Belgium, Netherlands. Around the world now, 500 million people have access to the option of an assisted death. Something fundamental, I think, seems to be shifting around the world in terms of our attitudes towards death and towards choice. But of course, opponents of assisted dying have many, many concerns. Will vulnerable people be drawn into assisted death that they don't really want, for example? Is autonomy the only important value in life? What I want also has an effect on what people around me want, so the argument goes. Shouldn't we focus on improving palliative care, for example, before, as opponents put it, writing people off and just saying, well, you've had it, off you go? MPs have debated all of these matters, and I think one of my guests will probably disagree with me when I say this now, and she's very entitled to, but I think it has been debated to quite a significant length, especially for a private member's bill. Others say it's been rushed for a matter of such importance, but it's in the Lords now, where things are moving very slowly. Peers have tabled over 1,000 amendments, as is their prerogative, but it means the bill may now run out of time, even though more days have been allocated for debate in the spring, 10 more days between now and the end of April. By the end of April, if it hasn't passed, then it's going to fall because the parliamentary session probably comes to an end around then. Is that fair? Is it up to the Lords, mostly a small number of peers who've tabled hundreds of amendments between them? Is it up to them to block the will of the Commons, and also, arguably, according to supporters of assisted dying, to frustrate the public will as well? Polls show that most people do support assisted dying. Do you think the Lords is overreaching here, that it's not their job to block, it's just their job to consider, to amend, to improve?
The point of payment for travel.
Those peers who say, look, this is how
slow
the
down
works.
The speed.
Like it or not, they're not doing anything unusual, they're just following the process. And if the bill needs amending, well, they're going to amend it, even if that means tough, it runs out of time. Should have come up with a better bill that didn't require so many amendments, say the opponents. 0345 6060 973. Do you agree or disagree with assisted dying? Do you think it's up to the Lords to have the final say on it? And they will do. They'll either pass it or block it, depending on how much progress they make. Let's start this conversation now with a couple of people who have strong views on it. We're just getting their calls and ready. It's going to be Naz Shah, who's Labour MP for Bramford West, who's against the bill, and also Dr. Jonathan Romaine, who's a writer and social campaigner on Rabbi, who leads the Religious Alliance for Dignity in Dying, which calls for change to the law on assisted dying. So they are, so he is in favour of a change in the law. We'll just get them up on the line while we discuss all of this, but already the text coming in on this topic. Andrew, for example, says, I know I've got a friend waiting for assisted dying who would like to live a life free of pain, and that is the fundamental argument here, isn't it? There are people waiting for assisted dying to potentially become legal so that they can escape a painful death, and the longer the Lords take in the argument of supporters of assisted dying, the more people will die a painful or undignified death. That is what's on the line here. It's literally the nature of people's deaths that could be determined by how long the Lords take. Well, look, Naz Shah, I'm pleased to say, is on the line now. Labour MP, as I say, for Bradford West, who's against the bill. Evening to you, Naz.
Hi, good evening, Paul. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, and thank you for joining me. So, the accusation is that the Lords are filibustering here. Tell me why you think that's not fair.
Well, I think it's disingenuous, because if you look at what your viewers will take from our listeners will take, is that the process of the Lords is simply, unless you have tabled an amendment at the committee stage, you cannot then debate it in report stage. And you know, because you've been following this bill closely, Paul, that throughout the bill, when we went to the report stage in the Commons, it was always said and put on the table, look, the Lords will iron the detail out. The Lords will do all of this. And now the detail is being ironed out to make the accusations that actually it's filibustering. If we look at just the first day, when we're talking about the Lords were talking about devolution, etc., but that is a real issue, because those devolution powers, when we are making legislation here in the UK, how will that affect the island outside of England per se, Wales, Scotland? You know, there's concerns raised about the congruence between the bill in Scotland and the UK. I mean, I'm not over the detail on that at the moment, but I know there's some work being done around that. So I think it's really disingenuous, and I think it's not. For me, it has left a really bad taste in my mouth, because the accusations in the Lords now, where there's robust debate happening on things which matter, because that's what we were told in the Commons. Well, we'll send it to the Lords and they'll get over the detail. And now there's people getting over the detail, and the process isn't being explained, and it's not genuine criticism. That's the way the House of Lords works.
I mean, some of those amendments are really, really important and interesting, and you brought out one of them there, which is the kind of incongruence between Scotland potentially passing one assisted dying bill in the next few months and England and Wales passing another. So I don't for a moment doubt the fact that there are really, really important issues to be discussed. I suppose what supporters of the bill say is that peers have also tabled a huge amount of amendments that they think are just time wasting. So one of them, for example, is comes up time and time again, and each one's an individual amendment, changing the phrase assisted dying to assisted suicide, because opponents of assisted dying prefer that phrase, assisted suicide. I mean, that's kind of pointless, right, in just changing the text of the bill. So do you not think it is true that in some ways peers are deliberately trying to slow things down?
I think, look, I can't speak for every single peer and what their intentions are, because even in the Bill Committee, my intention was very clear, and you know, and we had this discussion at the time, that I was coming to it from a very open mind, because like you just said, there are many people out there who are waiting for this legislation. And when I went into that Bill Committee and spent weeks on it, when we scrutinised it, the truth is that there were too many safeguards. Nobody's saying this bill is safe enough. Nobody's saying that, Paul. And you've got people who are... So if there are, for example, 10 people who put that amendment down and they withdraw that amendment because it can then be debated at report stage, that is not going to be 10 different debates. It's just going to be one debate that people partake in, is my understanding. And again, I'm not an expert on the Lord's processes, but what I do know, which is important for listeners to understand, I hope, is that you have to be able to put that amendment down to be able to debate it in report stage. So that's the process of the Lords. And you've got people who are, Tanny Gray-Thompson, Paralympian, absolute, one of the leading experts on disability rights advocates in the country. You've got Baroness Finlay, who was an absolute professor on palliative care. These are heavyweights in this industry who know what they're talking about. They're giving this the scrutiny it absolutely deserves. That's the beauty of the Lords, is having that expertise to tease out and iron out things. For example, the issue for me was always about, it was about anorexia.
Yeah.
That loophole wasn't fixed in the Commons before it went to the Lords. That loophole still outstays. It's not. There were two amendments that I tabled at the time when the report stage, and one was about anorexia. One was very much about, people deliberately starving themselves to die and stopping eating and voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Now, they were two different amendments, and yet one was supported, the other one wasn't. And they for me, Paul, what the Lord's process has shown, if anything, is it's reaffirmed my concerns. It hasn't allayed my concerns, unfortunately.
All right, I want to bring in Dr. Jonathan Romain as well here for a moment, Naz. Evening to you, Dr. Romain.
Yes, hello.
Thank you for joining me. Do you think, in your view, what's happening in the Lords is filibustering? Are they deliberately trying to slow things down, do you think, in order to scupper the bill?
Some are, without any doubt at all, because, look, it's past the Commons. That's number one. And the Lords certainly have a role to scrutinise, but not to obstruct. And some of these amendments are instructive, like, for instance, the one about Scotland, because that's easily remedied by, Scotland has to have residence for 2 years beforehand. There are solutions to these. Or someone brought up the amendment about that prisoners shouldn't be eligible. Well, they wouldn't be eligible unless they were terminally ill. That applies to everyone, including people who are disabled. Just as you're disabled, you can still have a long and enriching life. So some